Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay, now, that Roger's here, as I said, Roger and I work together, tremendous relationship in the latter days of IH, tremendous people. And Roger has worked with all the different products and 50 years at Case IH. So Roger.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully we can have some fun this morning. You've got some questions as we go through. Please ask. I don't have the answers, but we'll make something up. Everything's going to work for us. So what we're going to talk about is the transition of the Farmall tractor into the Magnum line. How did this transition take place? And, you know, when you deal a little bit about that, first thing you want to know, who is this guy talking to you? Who is Roger Lewno? And as Dan mentioned, I had 50 years with the company between Case IH and International Harvester. I did start in '72, so a little bit about the association, and this is kind of the agenda that I've got set up. I want to associate what I had with International Harvester. I want to work a little bit through the service training. We had some guys here from the Sheridan area, so they know exactly where I'm talking about. And then a brief history of Farmall. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just kind of quickly so you kind of see the transition that took place. And I'm going to pick everything up. When I started working for the company, the 66 series tractors were going down the line. So I'm really going to start, my first involvement with the tractor movement was with the 86 series. So we're going to kind of pick up when the 86 comes in and work our way right up into the Magnum tractor. Fair enough? Okay. So as we look at that and we kind of see where we're headed, who am I? And I'm just a little country boy from South Dakota, just north of here. And as you start to deal with it, all I wanted to do is farm. That was my whole object. And kind of a little bit about how all this took place is farming, you need some cash. I didn't have any cash to get started, so I couldn't farm to go broke, I guess is the way to say it. So when I graduated from high school, I went to work for a large farmer in the area. And we got the hay hauled, we did all the fall work, we got the combining done, we got everything done. So, make a long story short, what I got is an early out to go to school. I went to school at Northern State College in Aberdeen, and I was getting the GI Bill. It wasn't a lot of money, I don't know, $70 a month or something like that. But boy, for a country boy in the big city, I was having a good time. And you know what about a 21-year-old boy will do when he's got a little cash in his hand. Think back, guys. No, don't think. So, bought a tractor. That's what I should have done. So I was having a good time. And back then, your semesters went from when you started in the fall and you went before you went home at Christmas. When you went home at Christmas, that semester was all over. And then when you came back in January, you started a new semester. I didn't have any money. I was having a good time, but now I had tuition. So I needed to find a job. So some of you have been into Aberdeen, you know how things were, and how if you go out on Highway 12, all of the implement dealers are lined up. First one at that time was Brown County Implement. Happened to be the John Deere dealer. And then you had Mickelson, which was a Case dealer. Clark Industries was across the way, and they were kind of a will-fit group. Butler Machinery, and then was Aberdeen Equipment, the International Harvester dealer. So I stopped at Brown County Implement, looking for a job. What can you do? Anything you want me to do, I'll try. Like to sell, get into parts, do whatever. They said, well, the owner just got in with a customer. I says, how long will he be? Oh, half an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, that's good for me. Time management, I'll go down to Aberdeen Equipment. Go down to Aberdeen Equipment. I says, looking for a job. Met with the owners, Chuck Herther and Larry Odlin. The next morning, at about 10 o'clock, I was putting machines together. And this is in January, and all this stuff was shipped in. It came in box cars. You had to peel it out of the box cars. You had to find it under the snowbanks. and I think 464 or 468 cultivators, 4-row cultivators, and we were just hammering them out about two every 4 hours or something like that. We were pulling together. So that's how I got started. And if I kind of follow through as to what happened, from that area, I graduated from school, got married, and boy, things are really clicking now. I got a job as a cost accountant. Can you believe that, a cost accountant? I had all these numbers in Minneapolis. And quickly I said, guys, these numbers aren't for me. I got to get back to the farm. I got to get back to where things are really happening. At that time, when I graduated, Harvester wasn't hiring. The zone manager, the block man as they were called, gave me a call and says, Harvester's hiring now, why don't you give him a call? I did, and therefore I got hired by the company, and I had to resign from where I was at, so that's why my start date was the 10th of January, and the way the system was set up is what we would do is we'd go out on the truck. You had one truck went to the east side, one went to the west. So you were assigned one truck or the other. You went to that truck. So we'd fly out of Chicago. You'd meet the truck. You'd conduct training. So you flew out on a Monday morning. So you trained on Tuesday and Wednesday. You either moved the rig that weekend or during that day if it was staying, or you stayed at the same location, and then you taught Thursday, Friday. You moved over the weekend if you were moving, and then you taught class on Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, moved the rig over to the new location, set it all up, got fuel, all of those things. I can give you stories about getting fuel, because fuel was very high and not available, and set the truck up for the next guy. We'd fly back in, teach out of the base school service, and 2 more guys would come out, and every 4 weeks you just rotated out on this basis. It was a fun program. You got to see a lot of country as it started and as it went through. Any questions in that area? Hickory Hill was set up as the service area, so as we followed everything within the base school, and as rotations started to come in, Harvester started down a downslope. My wife was teaching school at Streeter. She was a high school teacher, an English teacher. And don't follow my English, because she wouldn't be proud of me at times. But she was an English teacher. And as she's teaching, she signed her contract year to year to year. And things were getting tough, and it's always within the company. If you made it past Thanksgiving, things were pretty good. The turkey really tasted good. But Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, that week in there, if anything was going to happen, that's when it happened. And yes, it happened. What they said is, we're closing down the Hickory Hill facility, and we're moving everything into Hinsdale. They had a training facility down in Tifton, Georgia. We closed the Tifton, Georgia facility, closed it down, and we brought everything back to Sheridan, to the Hickory Hill location. When I say Hickory Hill, what this really was, Harvester had a photographic center out there, for those of you who don't know it. Harvester's very forward thinking, and they had video was part of what they were after. And at that time, you got to realize you couldn't do what he's doing back here and bang, and you got it on a screen. You could do all kinds of things. So none of that happened. So as that process took place, not only because you got a deal, you got CE, you got motor truck, the facility lended itself. It's right off the Fox River, just before the Fox River goes into the Illinois River in Ottawa. And they could make your scenes look, they could have a truck there and make it look like it was in the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean. Or you could have a setting where it made it look like you were in the Rocky Mountains or something like that. They were very skilled at making that happen. So when we came back as sales training, we had about 650 acres. I went out and rented another 650 acres. So we were running about 1,300 acres that we had available to us, so that we could do in-field demos. And that became the training center. And training's like farming. Just like now, your commodity prices go down, they come up, you got good times and bad times. Within the company, training follows that same wavelength. and I thought I had rode the hill high enough, and I jumped out of sales training, went back into the Hinsdale facility, into the Product Support Center, and started to follow my total career as it started following from that point, unannounced to me. And as I went back into the Hinsdale area, I ended up following the 86 and 88 series tractors as the marriage started to come together. So, a little bit about me. That's who I am. I'm married. I got 2 boys. Both of them are doctors. One graduated right here in Iowa from Drake University, doctor of pharmacy. The other kid went and became a medical doctor. He's at the University of Michigan right now in Ann Arbor. My wife, last May, got her doctorate degree. Don't ask me what a 77 or 73-year-old lady's going to do with a doctorate degree. Cost me a lot of money, but she got it. So I'm the only dumb one in the family. Okay? So with that all being said, and where we're at, we kind of want to move on from where we're at here, and we kind of want to go into the transition of the Farmall tractor into the Magnum. How did this come about? How did some of this happen? And this is coming from my perspective as I see things as it kind of unfolded. And like I said, if we look back 101 years ago now, International Harvester in 1923, released the Farmall tractor. And you think to yourself, 100 years ago, what was farming like? Some of your grandfathers, your forefathers, and they told you stories, and you kind of piecemeal everything together. Harvester had a great organization throughout all of the U.S. One of the things it didn't have was a quick tractor that would answer everybody's needs. And Henry Ford and the Fordson tractor was gaining market share and going very, very strong at that time. So Harvester had a plan. We need a tractor that's all-purpose. We need a tractor that can till. We need a tractor that can cultivate. We need a tractor that can plant. We need a tractor that can pull wagons, etc. So born was the F-12. That tractor came out in 1923, and it started with the Farmall name. Farmall meaning that it could farm all. It could do everything as it was. It was set up on a tricycle-type arrangement so you could go down through the rows and cultivate. So questions in that area. So by 1930, 100,000 of these tractors had been produced. Now, there were other companies that were into this business and coming in. Harvester was the first company that was successful in being able to carry it forward. They were the first company that had dealer organization throughout North America that could support the tractor, and they brought the tractor in at a price that was affordable for the farmers. Comments there? So when you look at that and you look at the F-12, and you kind of see the picture of it sitting on the screen, think about that and go 100 years later to today, 101 if you want to be exact, and think about the tractor today and farming there. If you look at that tractor, where did you sit? Right over the drawbar. You sat on a metal seat right over the PTO. Oh, I'm not so certain that those early ones were even shielded back then. And we talk about ease of entry into the cab today, how easy it is. Think of crawling on that tractor, and you're stepping up, and then think of where you're sitting and your feet are going forward. Oh, now you kill the engine. You can't hit the starter to get it started. You got to go out and you got to crank it. How many wrists got broken because the tractor kicked back as you tried to crank the unit? So a lot of things that happened as we deal with how this unit came together. And think, however, if you look at what that tractor offered, it sure beat following a horse. At least when you were done at the day, you didn't need to go out and water it and feed it and get the harness off and all those things. Put in a little fuel and you were ready to go again for the next day. Steam tractors were big. Case Company had big steam tractors, but they were suited good for belt operation, but they didn't lend themselves well for tillage operations. Why? because you had to have so much support. You had to have fuel coming to that tractor and water. You possibly had to have 2 or 3 teams of horses pulling wagons, pulling water just to keep the tractor going. Everybody kind of follow? You got to put yourself back in perspective. And the companies were building big, heavy tractors. As a matter of fact, Harvester had the 1020 and the 1530. These tractors were big and held themselves well, but they weren't suitable for doing everything. They were more of a tillage tractor, if you kind of follow it. So Harvester continued to build this tractor, but the Farmall tractor is the one that linked and grew. Now, when you deal with that, and we deal with the units, we went up from the F12, we came in with the F20 and the F30. And these were kind of looked at in the marketplace as a 3-bottom plow tractor, a 2-bottom plow tractor, and a 1-bottom plow tractor. Well, maybe in South Dakota, that analogy where I came from worked pretty well. But if you go to Bad Axe, Michigan, I guarantee it doesn't work, because a 1066 possibly had a hard time pulling a 3-bottom plow. Soil conditions deem a lot as to how the tractor can perform for you. So, as times grew, Harvester carried this ball, and all of a sudden, what we did is we came in and we had a name change. We went from the F over to the regular tractors. So as regular tractors came in, not a whole lot of change. The powertrain remained the same. You went to a 4-speed. You could get the tractor on rubber tires. Marked improvement as to where you were at. You also got to realize that the war was going on during this time frame, and things were tough as everything went through. Harvester had its own hydraulic or power lift system, and the F12 grew to the F14. And then in 37, a big change came about. They went to the number 50 red paint. And the color red from the gray went away, and that's when that transition took place. So the red color is similar to what we've got on current Magnum tractors today. Any questions there? So if you look at it, just a quick brief history of where those tractors were at, and here we're going to speed ourselves up. In 1939, those F numbers were dropped, and they went to letter numbers. The H and the M came in, possibly the most popular tractors that ever hit the marketplace, followed by the A and the B. And if you follow along with the lettering, it was a huge success. You changed. A little bit of styling came into the tractors as where it was. You got electric starts and things on the tractors. You could put lights on them so you could work at night. So some of this stuff really started to propel and bring itself up. And then if we follow along, in 1954, Harvester went back from the letters, went back to numbering systems again. So the A, the C, the H, and the M were replaced by the 100, 200, 300, and 400. Virtually was a number change that happened on the tractor. Once again, a little bit more styling. You got diesel engines coming in. The diesel engine came in on the M with the Super M TA and the TA torque amplifier. Customers were looking for the ability to shift the tractor on the go. TA will change your ground speed by about 33% or so is the number. Depending on tires and things, that's your ratio that you're going to work. So as the tractor itself balanced. And then a year later, we carried everything for 10, 12 years before, and now bang, and now you go a year later, and they changed the numbers again. And the numbering sequence went to the 100, 200, and the 350 and the 450 as these models changed. So virtually the same tractor, same powertrain, everything came in. That's one of the hassles that happened because all of a sudden, Harvester really made a big change. And they brought in the 560, 460, and the 660 tractors. Those tractors had some issues because what we had is you had gas and diesel engines on those tractors. Those tractors were running very well. The powertrain that you had on the early tractors wasn't there to support it. And we had some reliability issues. And when you deal with the reliability issues, at the same time, our major competition out in the marketplace was suffering very hard because he had a two-lung tractor trying to keep everything going. And they introduced the 4010 tractor. So those two kind of weighed heavily, and they pulled some market share away from International Harvester Company. 1963, a big change came about. Went away from the 560, 460, and you came out with the 706 and 806. And that's when the powertrain changed big time. Virtually a totally new tractor. Once again, you were available on gas and diesel. You had wide front ends, you had narrow front ends as that tractor developed and carried itself through. And in 65, a couple of years later, the 1206. And I've been around as we go through this horsepower change. You're going up over 100 horsepower. You know what you as customers would say? You'll never hold that power. You can't get it to the ground. We had it when you went over 100 horse. We had it when we went over 200 horse. We had it when we went over 300 horse. You get the same thing. So as that come in, so the 56 series tractors followed the 706, 806. So you had the 56, 26 series tractors, and there's some other models that I'm not bringing in here, and then the 66. So if you look at the Farmall tractor line, the Farmall name continues today with Case IH. There's over 5 million tractors that have been retailed. That's a lot of tractors, guys, especially in the markets that we're in today. And there's about 25 units that Farmall is still producing, or Case IH is still producing, of the tractor line today. And if we look at those, you're in that 35 horse to about 140 horse or so is where those tractors set. So with that, what I want to do is I want to kind of jump in, and where does the 86 series tractors come in and how do they play? The 86 series tractors were built on the same chassis as the 66 series tractors. And if you recall the 560 tractor, you had a long nose. You sat right over the drawbar, almost like that F12. So when the 66 came out, your cab was way in the back if you had a cab. Your seat was way in the back. You still had a long nose. The 86 series tractors, what they did is you could get a control center, fancy name for a cab, went onto the tractor. And the cab was mid-mounted, so the cab was pushed forward on the chassis. By pushing it forward, it was like riding a horse. You weren't sitting over the back and bouncing as you followed yourself through. So the cab came in, styling changed, made the tractor look better. Two-door cab entrance, so you could get in on the left and the right-hand side. You had heater and air conditioning. Boy, we could use that today, right? As things come about. The cab was ISO-mounted. What does that mean? It's sitting on rubber, so you're not hearing, so it's deadening the sound. So things that were happening, that happened. The muffler was placed under the hood, or under the hood or the cowling that goes over the engine, as it was, instead of being on the pipe, trying to improve your visibility out to the back. Basically, the same powertrain that was used on the 06 series through the 66 series is basically what you had. The tractor had the TA, torque amplifier. What were customers looking for? They were looking for a power shift. Why? Our buddies Case were out there, and they come out with a 3-speed power shift. Deere came out with a 6-speed power shift. Everybody was looking for the ability to shift the tractor on the go. So if I look at what happened, and this is 76. So 2 years later, in 78, fall of 78, Phoenix, Arizona, we introduced the 2+2. What was the 2+2? I love this tractor. I followed a lot of it. But how did the 2+2 enter? The 2+2 was shown in Phoenix We had girls that danced around the Dick Van Dyke studio. Boy, everything was great. And then we took the tractors or the dealers out to the field. They got a chance to operate the tractor firsthand in the field, drive, etc. And Bud Ewell, as Dan mentioned, he was the father of this tractor. He was the force that was driving that tractor. What were dealers looking for 2 years after the announcement of the 86 series when they got to see a new tractor? A power shift. What did they get? A 2+2. So you can about imagine how some of the morale had kind of followed as it went through. So a little bit about happened. I was involved with the launch of this tractor. When we get out there with the launch, we as people working on the tractors, we had about 35 tractors to prep and get ready for it. We didn't have a lot of hand tools, wrenches, things of that nature. We were using rock just to kind of use as a hammer as you're pushing things in and doing things. So we didn't have that. And Bud Ewell was very adamant that he didn't want any bad names about this tractor. I don't want anybody to call it a Snoopy, an anteater, a long nose, any of that. So at that time, Jerry Osmond was the reliability manager on the 86 series tractors. Mike Estes was the reliability manager on the four-wheel drive, and they gave this tractor to him as we're phasing out of the four-wheel drive tractors that were produced by Stagger up in Fargo. So that transition has taken place. And what we're going to do is Bud's got his people coming in. So he's got a select group that are going to talk about this tractor when the dealers are in and promote it. So what does Bud do? He gets a pickup, gets the bed loaded with ice. Sounds good already, doesn't it? Has beer put in the unit, and he's really going to have an afternoon where he's going to get these guys all ginned up about this tractor. Mike Estes was very artistically talented. So what he did is on the right-hand side, he drew a shark head out of paper, and we taped it onto the side. And I'm supposed to drive the tractor out through the gates so they can see it, make a full circle, bring the tractor back. So therefore they were sitting, so they saw the left side as I came around until I made that turn, and then they saw the right-hand side. And if you guys know Bud Ewell, he just went berserk when he saw that on there. And I just told him that the cab couldn't hear. I don't know what he's saying because the cab was so quiet. So he wasn't very happy with what we did. And back in 78, that's when Chicago shut down. 294, everything shut. It was a terrible winter throughout the Midwest. It was also bad in Arizona. It was so bad that we couldn't even get to the field for one group session of the people that were there. Bridges, there was no bridges, but all these low spots were filled with water. You couldn't go through, so you had to kind of wind your way through the roads to get from one point to the other. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but so the story goes, we had buses. We possibly had 10 or 12 buses bringing the dealers out as they came to the field. Well, the buses always had to follow the lead bus. Okay, so the lead bus was king. Well, these bus drivers got a bet that they could get to the field first, and whoever got there first got a case of beer. Everything's about beer. So, as this story goes, everybody's following the way you're supposed to come in. Have any of you been to Arizona when it rains and how slick it gets? It just very, very slick. You can't even walk across the ground. And when this happened, and it gets so slick, these buses pulled off early because they had been there 2 or 3 times now, so they knew where they were kind of going, and they pulled off early on the approach. Needless to say, the buses didn't make it. And whoop, whoop, and the buses were caught. That possibly sold more tractors than we'll ever realize. Because now the buses are stuck, the dealers are on, some of them got the penny loafers on the unit. What are we going to do? The vice president of the company is out there, and he's screaming, what's we going to do? Well, we'll take the 2+2 and just tie a chain. You can't pull that bus with that. We pulled the bus, and Bud wrote orders just like he wanted. We had a huge success out of the launch in Phoenix, maybe because of the bus drivers. Okay, if that makes sense. And if you talk about the 2+2, what was the advantage? If you look at that tractor, it was equally distributed for weight. The tractor was equally balanced. The way the tractor itself set up. Got to kind of look at what I wrote on here so I follow the same things. The tractor itself, because it was equally weight distributed, it had a good pull capability. And you look at different things as to what that tractor had. Fuel tank up front. The engine went way up front, and that's what gave you the stability. Maneuverability. The tractor had excellent maneuverability. And if you think about what was happening in this time frame, the industry had been on 40 wide rows, 40, 36, and 38-inch rows. Here in the Midwest, corn and beans went almost in about a 5-year span, went down to 30-inch rows. That took place very quickly. This tractor would lend itself not only for the narrow rows, but for the wide rows. It worked itself in for the guys, the beet farmers at 22-inch rows, so everything married itself as it came together. Now, how was the tractor built? The tractor was built into two sections. You had the rear half of the tractor, and you had the front half. And they were built in little stables or little areas themselves, and they were hand-built. The back half was an 86 series tractor, and the front half you had the frame and the front, and then you came together into one cell and brought it together. Therein was the first issue that we had. Because they were built in individual cells, we had 4 or 5 people that were putting the rear together. Instead of it coming down an assembly line, you had 4 or 5 people building the front half instead of it coming down, and then you married it together, and you had 4 or 5 people putting it together. We had no consistency. The tractors weren't all the same, because how you routed lines, and he routed lines or hoses or wires, they were all different. Sorry to say, because I'm talking about the product that I followed. I believe we should still have this tractor in the marketplace today, because it had unsurpassed performance, maneuverability. The tractor did what we said it was going to do. The other thing we did with the tractor is we introduced a new hydraulic system on it. PFC, pressure flow compensated hydraulic system. There's some other acronyms that we use with it at times too. So, what happened and what went wrong? What were some of the things that happened? Well, we introduced the 33 and the 35. The 37 came in later. And I've tied this together with the 6,000 series 2+2s because they're virtually all the same as we came in. When you deal with it, dealers came to Phoenix expecting a power shift transmission. Instead, they got a totally new tractor, different tractor, totally different concept as it came together. The hydraulic system, pressure flow compensated hydraulic system, great hydraulic system, no charge pump on the unit. So you're relying on piston pumps to draw fluid into the system. And with that, cold weather, how do you move it? A piston doesn't have a good draw. So therefore, we went with thermal bypass valves. So when it was cold, you bypassed the filter. So we had hydraulic-related issues on the tractor. You had one pump for steering, one pump for the remotes and the rear. We had a big mod program. We had some issues with the front axle. With the front axle, we had to pull the ring gears. We had to pull the total front axle off, and we had to enlarge where the dowel pins went because it stuck, and if you hit, you're subject to crack. So we had about 1,000 tractors we had to do. I managed the program. It was possibly the most successful program of completion that the harvester ever had. Why? Because we started with a seed of 25 axles, meaning that I had 25 axles. I had to go get 25 axles off of tractors that were in customer hands. So the way the program went, what we did is we notified the dealer, we need these tractors in, we need the axles, we'll have a truck at your location on X, and I need those axles in, we'll give you an axle for every axle you give me. So think of yourself as a farmer out there, and the dealer comes out, he maybe takes your tractor into the shop, or does it out on your farm, jacks it up, takes the wheels off, drops the front axle out of the tractor, puts it in his pick-em-up truck, and you're hoping that he's going to come back with an axle. And that's what we did. We followed through, and we were very successful in making it happen. And what we were trying to do then is marriage and match how many hours was on this tractor versus the axle that came in. We were looking for the hours, so we tried to push an axle. If a tractor had 200 hours on it, the axle that we gave them would be from maybe 150 to 250 hours is kind of the work. But it was very successful. But think about you as customers and the support that you gave us to pull that axle back and forth as it works. So the other area that I want to talk about on the 2+2, and this one kind of hurt a little bit, but we had the assembly because we were building in these cells. The routings and things weren't good. Mike Estes was a reliability manager. He says, we've got to audit these tractors. Matt Legowski is a plant manager at Farmall, and he says, no, I'm building good tractors. You don't need to do anything about that. The tractors are great. And we says, well, we're going to come and audit tractors. So we're coming in 2 weeks. We had some other stuff coming up. So Matt says, oh, finally agreed. Okay, come on up. Well, Friday before we go up, I'm in my office in Hinsdale, and I get a call, and the call goes something like this. Roger, you've been set up. Click. I go over to Mike's office, and I says, Mike, I got the weirdest call. I got a call, and the voice dropped, and it says I've been set up, and we walked away. Do you know what it's all about? I says, no. He says, you recognize the voice? I says, I think I know where it came from. I think it came from Farmall, but I don't know. I can't prove it. I don't know. To this day, I don't know for sure who made that call. So, make a long story short, Monday morning, we all go out to Farmall. We go to Rock Island. We sit down with Matt Legowski about 8:30, and he reads us the Riot Act and doesn't know why we're spending the money and why we're here and what we're doing. Okay, that's fair. But he says, I got tractors out there. If you want to audit them, have at it. I'll support my staff. Paul Roush was a quality manager at the time at the Rock Island plant. And he says, you guys just come in and go audit your tractors and come back and give me a report. So we walked back to the area where they had them. There was possibly 25 2+2 sitting there. We're going to audit these tractors. Mike's a little devious in his side. And they says, here's your tractors. Just, I'll go out and get one. Mike says, no, I'll go get a tractor. I want to pick one myself. Well, right out the gate from where it was at is where they were shipping tractors. That's where the pickup was at. So these tractors were all staged there. Mark walks out the outside gate and a green tag tractor where there's a truck waiting to pick it up, and he drives it back in, and we go through the audit process on that. That tractor failed miserably because they had just spent 2 weeks getting these 25 tractors or so that were sitting there all lined up for us to really be good. And I think Paul Roush got fired about 3 times in one sentence that Matt Legowski did. So needless to say, a lot of effort went into the quality and pulling that tractor back together as it was. So now we go from 78 and we come into 81. What happens in 81? We introduce the 50 series tractors. And when you say the 50 series, 50, 52, and 54 88 tractors. Total new concept tractor. Total different drivetrain. Tractor was introduced in Kansas City. Once again, just like before, you had in-house in an arena show, and then you went to the field, and the dealers had the opportunity to drive, operate the tractor, work the tractor in the field as they needed to be. Bud called it the new number one. Big push on the tractor. You know what the dealers came in to see? Power shift. You know what they saw? Synchro Tri-6 transmission is what they got. So if you look at it, totally different design. The TA finally went away on the 50 series. You still had the 32 and the 3688 that had the TA, but you got a totally new powertrain on the unit. You had the ability to shift on the go. Performance, productivity, and reliability were driven and brought in with this tractor. The tractor has and had a great unit. So when you deal with what happened, power, productivity, and reliability, we used the 436 and the 466 engines into the tractor. Everything itself started to pull itself together as far as where you were at. On the right, you can see the shift pattern. So you had synchronized on the speed transmission. So you go first, you could power shift to second, then down to third and fourth. So it was nicely arranged. I should have mentioned that when we came out with the 86 series tractors, what we did is we placed the shift linkage and controls over on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, excuse me, off of the console where it was at. Well, that was great because guys didn't like reaching over there. They didn't like climbing over these levers over here. So as this tractor came in, we moved the gear shift over to the right-hand side again. Your park lock handle was left on the other side. New concept, forward airflow. So when you deal with the front airflow, total new design, worked very well as what it had. So the tractor brought a lot of new things back to it. We had an 18-speed power Synchro Tri 6, and you had about a 17% change in speeds as you went from one gear to the other. Very solid as far as what that tractor could do. And here's where we start with electronics, because you had the thing called Sentry that was monitoring where and how the tractor would shift, and if we had sufficient oil pressure at the clutch packs and things of that nature. The tractor carried the PFC hydraulic system. So there's still the same old hydraulic system as we were working, only now we placed a charge pump within the tractor. Made it much more usable and for the unit. So the tractor hit the market, and the tractor was a very positive unit. When you look at the negatives that happened, no power shift. I don't know how to work that. The PFC hydraulics that we had, and some of the things that worked within that. The motor valve. Some of you guys have got those tractors today, and we got motor valves on them. And I don't think you've ever figured out what and how the motor valve works. Why? Because most of you got a little handle that sits here, and that handle was to prevent you from pulling the handle back into the neutral position. It wasn't meant for you to lock that handle so it couldn't kick back. You needed to change the detents. And the way the motor valve works is when you placed it in, whatever flow you had going to that motor valve, it had to be met before any of the other hydraulics were fed. So if you let that stop, hold that handle, you triggered the system and the rest of your hydraulics were dead on the tractor, correct? Yeah, so that was pure operation, but it's our fault for not communicating possibly as well as we should have as to how the unit worked. But closed center hydraulics, orbital motors are coming in. Ace pump was a big player at that point in time. When you deal with the Farmall tractors, one of the things is Harvester never had a good solid. You had the hood, you had the top, you had the side pieces. Did anybody ever see a Rainbow 50 series tractor out there due to paint? Our paint would fade at different colors. And so that was one of the negatives that we had. Harvester had invested, even so it's going down, possibly close to $1 million on a new paint system that was put in at Farmall. We never got the paint system fully activated as the company went out. But the process was there. We did the same thing in Racine when we did some stuff. So any questions there? Harvester runs out of funds. So what happens? If you think about what's happening and the time history is where we're at. Harvester's out of money. The strike, some other things that have happened. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Read The Tragedy of International Harvester. And I think that book sums up a lot of things that happened with International Harvester. But if you follow through what had happened, Case Company, on the other hand, had gone belly up in the 60s. They were owned by Tenneco. Tenneco purchased Kern County land. Kern County land, Case went with them. Tenneco's trying to figure out how can they get their money out of this Case deal. Case did not have a good dealer network. They had tractors, and they had discontinued building all of the implements and things that they had at the time. And their dealers were falling into Case Power and Equipment stores as to where they were at. Harvester, on the other hand, had a great dealer network, a great parts outlet. So you had that distributorship and a good name carrying itself out, just no cash. So Tenneco says, let's marry these two companies together, which is what happened. They purchased the assets of International Harvester and linked them together with Case so that they could get rid of, for all practical purposes, the Case company. And that's how the two companies virtually came together. And if you want another story, I don't know how much time I got, but if you want another story as to what happened as we're bringing these tractors together, one of the things that kind of transpired is the company selected that they were going to make the Case tractor. It was going to become the tractor, and we're going to paint it white, and they had it down in Dallas. Top management goes out there, and they're going to show this, and they bring some dealers in and going to go through everything about how it's going to be. And the dealers boot him off the stage. That's how ingrained the International Harvester and the blood and everything runs. Whoa, guys, we can't go. We're not selling a white tractor. So, Las Vegas, we got a coming together meeting in Las Vegas. And everybody comes together. We're bringing in all the equipment. We're bringing in our dealers, and everything's being married together. Times were not very good, and we're going to paint tractors. So what they did is we had all these tractors were being painted. So you take the white Case tractors that were in production at the time, and we're going to paint them red. So myself and about 15 other people from Burr Ridge, Hinsdale, we fly out to Phoenix to assist in getting this big show on the road. Well, one of the things when you flew in with Harvester, whenever you were on a plane, you had to have a coat and tie. So we come in. I suppose we left Chicago at, 8:30. We get out to Phoenix, or Las Vegas. We get to Vegas. We go down to where this warehouse is at the address. We all walk in, our coat and ties. And there happens to be a big fellow. Some of you may remember the name, Ray Bowerman. Ray Bowerman stood about 6'6", 6'8". He was just a big man. He played professional basketball in Europe. He was as gentle as you could be, but he had a big, deep voice. And he kind of came in, and we walked in. We're here to help. Who are we supposed to see? Ray looks at us in coats and ties, looks at his time, and it's maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock. And he says, I don't know what you guys are going to do here, and especially dressed like that. He says, I want you back here no later than 2 o'clock, and all I want to see is, assholes and elbows. That's what he was looking for. So we run away, change clothes, come back, so we're ready to work. It's about 6:30 or so, and Ray says, shut her down, shut everything down. Well, if you guys like a beer, I got a room, and I got some beer in there, just come on in. Well, you got the Case people there, and you got the Harvester people there. Well, if you think about it, we were like when you went to your prom or school dances when you were in high school. The boys are over there, the girls are over here, and nobody talks to anybody. So, you want a beer? I go to the cooler. You want a beer? Here. Okay. Case guy. You got to stop and think. We were enemies. We were fighting tractor for tractor in the marketplace just prior to this. And now you're being put as a team. So by the end of the week, what we got is, you want a beer? Oh, you guys want a beer? Pretty soon, you broke that barrier down if you follow what's beginning to take place. And Ray knew that. That's really why he had the beer. I received a lot of phone calls as things were matching. And one of the things that happened is we were painting all these tractors, and they're all set up to get painted. And Ray's got a group, a couple of brothers out of Racine, I believe is where they came from, and they're spray painting these tractors. But they ran out of paint. The show is coming on. We need paint. The tractor's got to dry, and they don't have paint. Ray came to me, and he says, you get a lot of calls. You got a pole? You know where we can get some paint? And I says, yeah. He says, let me call. So I call back to the Broadview Parts Depot. Oh, we got all kinds of paint. We got the numbers you're asking for, we got skids of it. Oh, good. Well, put some on a plane and ship it to us. Oh, we can't put it on a plane and ship it to you. Why? Because it's got a deal on. You can't fly it. Oh, I had been working with Keith Equipment in Casa Grande, Arizona. Bud Lewis was the service manager there. And Casa Grande isn't so far from Las Vegas. Let's see where we're at. So I called and I say, you guys got this paint? Yeah, we just so happen to have 6 gallons of it. Good. Okay, now we're trying to put together how far can I drive going one way and how far can they come the other way? Where would be a good meeting point in the middle that we can pick up this paint? And Chuck says, just a minute, Roger. There's a guy that just walked in. Let me talk to him for a minute. And he comes back and he says, I got a crop duster up here. Can you meet him in the airport in Las Vegas in about an hour? That's how we got the paint. That's how, if you follow what happened. We picked it up. He could fly it. I don't know, commercially we couldn't fly the paint. So we picked it up. Tractors got painted. In the meantime, we had a couple of folks coming in from California. They brought in some additional paint, and the show goes on without a hitch, and nobody knew the difference. So as that things came together. So when we start to work down the unit, if we look at 1987, Denver, Colorado, the Magnum tractor is introduced. A big show. We brought in a lot of people come into the show, a lot of dealer salesmen. Building the best was the theme that we used. And building the best because what we did is we tied together not only manufacturing but engineering as the tractor brought itself into the marketplace. Prior to this, I had gone out to Arizona because I was going to be the reliability manager on this, or not reliability, but service engineer on the tractor. I wanted to drive it. I walked into the test center. Howard Sartorius, who was the operations manager there, says, yeah, the tractor's right out here for you. I go out. They had just split the tractor. They had just put it together. There's no cab on it. All those tubes and everything weren't on it. You look under a bench, and there they sat. As soon as you put those tubes on, we get the cab on, you're capable of driving it. I says, that's going to be a long time, but that's how, in my indoctrination into the Magnum tractor as it came together. One of the things I believe that Magnum did for the company is it was the thread that brought the companies together, because it wasn't a case tractor, it wasn't an IH tractor, it became our tractor. Very significant, because now we all had something that we were pulling for. It just solidified the Case IH organization as it brought itself together. Any comments or questions in there as we bring it together? And we had a power shift. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that in, because now we had the power shift. And a lot of guys would say, well, how is this tractor and how did it come together? Yes, we used the power shift, and virtually the tooling that was set up to run the 50 series transmissions came in, and it was put in Racine, and those same tools were used to build the speed and the range transmission. Yes? Okay, that's a good question. That would be a top management question that was made, but one of the things that had happened is we were in Racine. Racine was set up to do the manufacturing at that time, and everything was there, where if you looked at the Rock Island plant, there was a lot of things that weren't in place at the time. So strategically, it was the right thing to do, and I think the offset was, well, we'll use the case tractor, we'll use the combine, the tillage company coming from the International Harvester, and that kind of links everything together, and everybody gets something out of it. So the case people were happy. That was the logic. You also got to remember that when this happened, emotionally, a lot of things happened, because the company dictated who was going to be your dealer. So they would come out to Spencer, Iowa, and Spencer, Iowa, if you had a strong case dealer or if you had a strong IH dealer, one of the guys, okay, you're going to be the dealer, you're out. You're going to be the dealer, you're out type deal. Emotionally, that hit the marketplace. And throughout the network, the small communities, Well, they took my dealer away. They took Sam out. They took Joe out. Whichever side of the fence you were on, somebody was getting hurt. And that emotion, that scar went very deep at the time. I'll try to pick that back up because it's history. It's what transpired as it came in. So the company introduced, and what we did is we introduced 7100 series, 7110, 20, 30, and 40 series tractors. 7140 came in at 195 PTO horsepower. Everything then was rated on PTO horsepower. So as the tractors came in, what you got is you got cab or ROPS unit on the unit, two-wheel drive or MFD, front-wheel drive on the tractor, an 18-speed full power shift transmission finally. And that was followed then with a creeper transmission that came in, which would give you another creeper. Tractor did. This tractor changed the industry. We took the exhaust system out from the center of the hood and put it over in the side so you no longer had to look through it. Today, everybody's there. Major changes. The hood was set up so you could get to the engine compartment without having to use wrenches and pull things apart. You could open the hood. None of the industry had anything of that nature prior to that. Oh, we brought in electronics because we went away from mechanical draft sensing to electronic draft sensing. Load sense pins on the unit to use with the three-point hitch. The tilt-up hood. So the tractor really started the industry. We were 5 horsepower under that 200 peg. Just like when that 1206 came in, you'll never hold a tractor going over 200. And some of you know that some of these tractors may have been putting a little bit more over than where they were at.
Was that intentional? Those tractors were all hot.
It wasn't intentional. It was, and the way the time set that was put on the tractors is we could be, I think it was 2% below, and you could be as high as 5% above. And that ramp went back and forth. The other thing that happens is when you go to get a dyno check on a tractor, most guys just back up, hook the dyno on it, pull the power down, zap, and read it. The real horsepower has to be taken when you get everything warmed up. You got to stabilize the dyno, you got to stabilize the tractor, and as you run it, the horsepower is naturally going to come down. But psychologically, it was good. And to go with that, what we did is the 7150, the South, was asking for larger tractors in the cotton area. We need to increase that horsepower on the tractor. So engineering went to work, and they came out with the 7150, or prototype to start with. I got chosen to be the project manager on that tractor. I'm going to bring this tractor into the market. Well, I get the job. About 2 weeks later, I'm sitting there saying, we haven't had any customer input on this tractor. I need some customers. So we pick 7 or 8 customers from down south. We take them out to Arizona, to the proving grounds, and we identify a 7140 with this proposed 7150. The only difference between the tractors, they were decaled, everything was the same, is one tractor had front fenders on it. That's how we identified which one was which. And I had an old VCR recorder, remember, with that half-inch drive tape that you had? And when you got out of the tractor as a customer, what I would do is videotape, ask you some questions. Went out there with Russ Green. So we work our way around. We talk about the tractor. You give us your input. Okay, the proposed tractor came in. It was going to have 213 horsepower. Engine horsepower is where it was set at. And going with what you're just saying there. So we get the tractors in. We get the customers in. And then Russ and I fly back possibly on a Thursday night. We possibly left Phoenix, give or take, 10 o'clock. We flew all night. When you work the time zone, we come into Chicago. We meet with Vicki Rickey, who was vice president of marketing for the Case IH organization at the time. We got Alden Brumball, who was the chief case engineer, and just lost his name, was the chief engineer from International Harvester. Glenn Colley, thank you, Kelly. Glenn Colley. And these guys are there, and you got their staff is there. And Vicki, we hadn't read the played the tape yet ourselves. We just got off the airplane. So we told her what we had. We had a tape. Some of it possibly wouldn't be very good. So we played. So she went on maybe 5-6 minutes on the first go to another customer. Go to another customer. And then she says, shut that off. And she had a language that makes a sailor kind of quiver. And she looked at engineering and she says, you guys got your job to do. Now get out of here. You got a year to bring me a tractor that is saleable in the marketplace. Whew, did a good job there. I'm really plowing. And then she turns to me. You got to find yourself a job, don't you? Because there's no need for a project manager if there's no project that's running down the road right now. So I had to go find a job. So needless to say, a year later, we introduced the 7150. 7150 came in with the horsepower, with the power growth. Wastegate turbo came on the tractor, and it delivered the performance that was expected out of the tractor. The first one had the horsepower, but didn't. I had one customer that never drove the tractor in the field with the implement down. And he came back and he says, that tractor's got more power than that 7140, but I'll buy that tractor before I'll buy this tractor. So very, very solid as to how it went. So where are we at today as things grew itself together? And if you look at the tractors that Magnum comes out today, we've got a rigid frame unit. We're working with basically the same transmission. We have now gone from an 18-speed to a 19-speed transmission. It's nothing more than playing with the engine and working, so you got one overdrive type gear that's placed in it. Still the same transmission. You've got a 21-speed if we go to the 400 as it comes in. We've got CVT options on the unit. The cab is still located over the rear axle, just like it was. And we meet the DEF requirements. All of the engines used today are Tier 2 engines. Tier 2 engines. And you know how many parts we put on that engine? I did this yesterday. I did 3 plant tours. You know how many parts we put on the engine to make it Tier 4 compliant? On the engine. Anybody? None. Not a part. It's a Tier 2 engine because with the SCR system, we treat the exhaust only. So the first thing you got after the turbo is a flapper valve, and then you get a DOX canister. We inject the DEF into the unit. The reason the muffler is so big is it's a mixing chamber. You got to give that exhaust a little bit of time before it exits out. So there is no big changes. And as we were coming with Tier 4 final and Tier 4 going into Tier 4 emissions, we were running a dual path because prior to this we had been with Cummins through the Case venture. That was the thing that Case brought to the party with the engine because they had just signed an agreement with Cummins where they would get the Cummins engine as an OEM engine, and Cummins could sell the engine on the same as an OEM engine. So therefore, we had the Cummins engine. Cummins went the way of, I must be getting old, but where you would shoot diesel fuel back and you regen the system to clean the system out. And the muffler becomes a particulate filter is really what it is. And the EGR system, I knew it would come to me after a while. And knowing that 2 years, 3 years later, we would have to go to the SCR system. So you were going to put 2 complicated systems on the tractor. What we did is we went to one system. We went to the SCR. You might ask yourself why. Because we were using the FPT, the old Iveco engine, as it was known, Fiat powertrain. And Fiat's our parent company. So therefore, what transpired is we took an engine that was used off or on road, and we took it to off-road. So the transition should have been relatively smooth. Yes, we had some bumps. The bumps were you as customers didn't quite fully understand what was taking place and didn't really like the fact that the government was telling you you had to meet this emissions. You liked that black smoke coming out. Our dealers really didn't know what was happening. Needless to say, we as company people really didn't know what was all taking place, but we all grew together. And that system today is very, very solid as to what it does and how it works. Whereas on the offset, most of our competition went with the EGR system. You got, depending on the company, 20, 30 different component parts that are placed on that engine just for the EGR. And then you got to put the SCR on top of it. And now you got two complicated systems working to meet the emissions. Any questions, comments in that area? So, as things come through, a couple things. Have some of you seen this bumper sticker? Nothing kills a deer like a Magnum. Yeah. You ever wonder how Magnum got its name? Yeah. Huh? Pardon? Yeah, PI in Hawaii. No, yeah, that's who it was. But he came in after. Yeah. If you stop and think, at the time, you look at the numbers and the letters and how Case used numbers. What are we going to use to identify this tractor? We need something that's going to be catchy, something that's going to catch the marketplace. Marketing's looking for that. So they start working with the suppliers and saying, how are we going to get where we're going? And a guy by the name of Tim Hansen. Tim Hansen was a twin. His brother was an avid hunter and fisher person. And his brother had just bought a new rifle. Somehow it had Magnum on it. The company, the agency that we were working with developed, I don't know, something like 10 names or so. We put these 10 names out to kind of get a quick feel from some select customers. What do they think about the names? What should they use? None of the names flew very well. So they went back to the book and started coming. Tim, on the other hand, was working as marketing. He was working with a lot of shows and exhibits and a lot of exposure. And he saw this Magnum on the gun, and he starts to think creatively out of there. And he thought, you know, I'm going to throw this name in there. The name came up with a new batch of people that they looked. He had done some research, so the name was clean. We could use the name. It wasn't going to interfere with anything. And Tim was pretty smart. He took a 410 shotgun and an old 10-gauge shotgun, and he laid these two on the table. And then he got a Magnum of champagne and set in the unit. And he got the meeting with top management, and he says, guys, nothing kills a deer like a Magnum. And to kind of illustrate that, I've got this 410 shotgun over here, and I got a 10-gauge. If you're going hunting and if you're going to go for a deer, which one would you want? So that was obvious. And he says, I tell you what, if you all agree to the name Magnum, what we'll do is I've got a Magnum of champagne on ice right now. We'll just fill our glasses and toast to it, which they did, and the rest became history, if you kind of follow what transpired. So it was kind of pushed in. The name has been very catchy, and if we look at what the company has done, we brought the name Stagger back onto the tractors. You got the Farmall name came back onto the tractors through Case IH. So branding and naming becomes hard. One of the things that global marketing is telling us, we as a company, Case IH, are spending too much money and time branding. Because if we go out and ask a customer, what tractor do you own? I own a Magnum. Which Magnum do you own? I own a Magnum. I don't know. It's a Magnum. Where they want you to say is, I own a Case IH tractor. It's a 7140 or whatever. You know, the branding was not where they wanted. So global marketing, they just don't like it that way. But anyway, questions here as the tractor itself kind of comes together. I know I've been very long-winded for you. I thank you for your patience. Yes?